Hey, good morning, Shelter of Island team.
Morning, Rob.
I guess, how do we begin this year? I guess, Rob, this is Gordon Gooding.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Okay. I guess you're going to do, you're going to give a little update on the ferry flooding hazard mitigation. Is that,
It's usually Joe,
I'll
right?
take that. Yep.
okay, all right?
Yep. Hey, Prop, Joe here.
Hey, Joe, welcome back. Good to see you.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, this will be a quick one because I haven't done much since I've been out. So I have to finish reviewing the final report. I had a couple comments from where I left off with them. So we need to make a few adjustments specifically with the conclusions and recommendations. And once I square that away with LK McLean, I'll work with them on that presentation and we'll send that over to your team for review. But we don't currently have a date on the calendar for a public presentation with the consultants yet.
Okay, all right, awesome. That was the immediate 2 points from that I wanted to follow up. So thank you for that update, Joe. And then yeah, this is PIO prior to the public presentation. On the LKMA note, I did want to follow up on the Exhibit E supplementary conditions. I know you had mentioned previous months that was still under review, no updates. Any further updates or discussion on that?
No updates. I'll make a note here to check in with our interim town attorney, but it's in the lawyer's hands, and I'll have an update for you before the next meeting.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Other than that, the Appendix X1, the contract amendment for the state local contract was fully executed. We provided a copy back to the town. The last RFR2 was disbursed May 6th in the amount of $17,534.70. Any other reimbursements anticipated for this grant?
We received an invoice somewhat recently that was in a small amount.
Yeah, we have two more invoices. They're each about 1,400, so not
Yeah, we may
much, but
be incentivized to wait till the report's finalized. That might be a better milestone and a more sizable invoice that would make the reimbursement amount make sense.
Okay, understood. Yeah, we'll defer to the town on when they want to submit for reimbursement on those final invoices or the remaining ones. And in terms of the quarterly progress report, that is upcoming. Q3 ends on the reporting period ends June 30th at the end of this month, and the deadline to dishes will be July 15th for that. But please feel free to send any drafts or ahead prior to signature for review and feedback, and I'll be happy to do that.
Rob, would you please circulate the fully executed X1 again? Because I don't see it in my emails.
Sure. Let me.
Yeah, the last thing I have would just share with Shelby was just signed by the supervisor. Thank you.
Okay, let me double check that for you right now. Yes, it was executed, and I did provide a copy on May 16th. And I'm sorry if the speaker that mentioned they didn't get it, I'll send over a copy right now.
Thank you.
What email address did you want me to send that to? I'm sorry, I can't tell.
Hey, Martin.
Kate Martin? Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Good, Joe?
Yes.
Mm,
Okay. Rob, I think that's a wrap. If you want to leave, right? We don't need Rob to stick around for agenda items.
No.
Yeah, I think that's it. The only other item on that, if there's any other questions regarding closeout, or if there's any other any issues with the budget or anything like that, please let me know. And if there's anything the state needs to support on, we're happy to coordinate anything. But I think for now we're on track, on schedule, no issues with the scope or budget. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. Yep.
Perfect. All right. I will thank you everyone for time today, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Please reach out if any support is needed, and Christina, you will get that executed copy forwarded immediately in the next 2 minutes. All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, team. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess I inherited the
Yeah.
driving today, yeah.
You're in the driver's seat. Okay, I guess we can just go through this. Okay, the second item is the capital planning request presentations. Yes. Is there any order here in this?
Kelly.
Kelly?
Yeah, I would just
Kelly's up, yeah.
down the list.
Thank you for meeting with me today. I just want to let everyone know this is my third year requesting a car. Because I'm trying to make sure that we have a car if we need it. So a used car will be needed for the senior center. I would think next year it would definitely be needed. It's most likely gonna replace the PT Cruiser. The PT Cruiser is about 17 years old. And it's used for the majority of the local client transportation, including medical appointments, shopping excursions, trips to and from the senior center programming, including nutrition. Tried out this Chevy Bolt. It seems like a good choice for our clients. Has the easy access for the seniors, nice legroom. Seems like a reliable car. It will hold its value. I expect it should be between 15,000 to 21,000. And it was like based on if it was purchased today and within 100 miles of Shelter Island.
What kind of car was it?
Chevy Bolt.
Bolt.
Kelly, is that gonna require any charging infrastructure at the senior center to support?
Probably, yes.
Okay.
I don't know how much that would be. I know that the police has it, so I guess we could just go over there and use it if needed. But it would be.
Right, you want one
to
there.
have it there.
What
Yeah, you
what
want
did that,
one.
what did that cost when we put them in here?
Oh, that was when Jay did. It's not a big dollar amount. We did
You can
something.
put it, you
We
can
did it over here.
You
in
can
the
put them
building.
right into the
Yeah.
building, like that's.
So it's insignificant. We don't need to put a
No,
budget
it's
for
not
it.
$1,000.
So it might fall within that.
I'd want to put it in my house. I have one at my
I have one also. It was basically 800 for the unit. And then your electrician is probably another 400, so it's in that range.
Probably like 1,000.
We don't even use the unit here. They just use, you can put that other adapter into a 240 plug and you pretty much just have the cost of the electrician. Yeah.
That's what we have.
It's not as smart as a home, I have the home device also, but
So we're comfortable with that range.
$1,000 is fair for that.
Yeah.
All right. Very green.
But
It's very green.
So it worked out. You had borrowed the other ones, right? So, and that worked. I
it
think
worked out pretty well.
I think they're a good height for people to get into and out of, I think, too, for the senior population. Good.
And Kelly, so just to offset it, we have a $0 budget right now. And look, I have 3 or 4 proposals on my plate that I'm going to present today too. I would offer to you again, off-season, right? So when our TCOs aren't working, the use of our traffic control vehicle, which is the same vehicle that you're requesting.
Okay.
So for basically 8 of the months, that could be made available to you
I
again.
guess I just have to figure it out with my grant and get it on to the grants, because that's how we get paid, like.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
All right.
But it just is just an option for you off-season in those other months that if,
Sure.
I don't know what the town board's gonna decide budget-wise, but it's an option
Yeah,
to
just try to be proactive.
offset 100%.
Like, it's definitely.
Yeah.
What car do you have? What kind of a car is
We
it?
have an electric vehicle, same as a highway, as the town building department has.
It's unmarked.
It's unmarked. Yeah, we put decals on it when the TCOs are in season. It has a police radio in it, has some lighting. But they could share that vehicle in the off-season to use for senior services, something. So, and I don't know the availability. There might be some ways for you the building department now has 3 of those cars. I don't know how often all three are used simultaneously, so maybe one of the three could be used to offset some of the seniors during the season.
Assessors use it too, so all.
Right, so there's a lot of-
Pretty often.
Yeah,
You
okay,
get a
good, yeah,
lot of- Yeah.
I don't want
There's
to,
kind of a schedule, so you might be able to work with the building department and see if there's a day that they don't anticipate them all being used, and, maybe you could get on the schedule for some of those days
Okay.
too.
Or if,
We
you know,
can't-
I don't know if we could just call if needed, sometimes we just run into, the puzzle of trying to figure out. We usually use all volunteers when that happens.
Yeah.
And their cars.
Yeah, definitely try, like, call Mary Ellen if you get into a pinch and see if there's a car available.
Okay.
Because because the assessor's
Yeah.
office uses them too, so.
Yeah.
that's an issue.
The people who drive the cars, it's just volunteers,
No, the paid employees and volunteers.
both.
Both.
Okay.
do you mind if we just reverse the order a little bit? Jack's on from EMS, and I don't mind if he jumps. He's going to do the high water vehicle because it's an EMS vehicle, and he's on Zoom. Do you mind doing that?
Are we done?
I thought Kelly was done. Yeah.
I'm done. Am I
All
done?
right.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Sorry, Kelly, I thought you were done.
No, it was.
Okay,
I just
good.
didn't know if you were done.
No.
Can you make him Jack bigger on the screen so he fills the screen? I like presentations better that way. Sorry, Christina.
Presentation will be finished.
Thank you, Kelly.
Bye, Kelly.
All right, Jack, you're up.
All right, good morning, everyone. I was looking to address the committee on the allocation of a high water rescue vehicle. As most of you know, we did attempt to apply for a grant that was not successful. Then I believe it was transferred to a capital item for town funding, which was removed at the end of the year during the budget process. I just want everyone to remember that our needs have not changed. The access to the residents in Ram Island remains a concern. We did spend a lot of time and effort with the town engineer to come up with some mitigation options. The financially wise one at the time was to request a vehicle to get through the point that we will lose access during storms. That I want this committee to consider that again. We do have an obligation to protect the people in Ram Island. The road has not been fixed. The vehicle is the financially wise choice at this point, short of, I'm not sure exactly if that would be hundreds of thousands or $1 million to fix the road. The other option is to get the road fixed, which did not seem to be in the short term. So, I'd be open to any questions if anyone had. The application that we did for the grant remains the same. I can regenerate this if it's necessary. But the needs would be there. For anyone new into this discussion, part of the vehicle that we spec'd out would be for a vehicle that would have other uses besides sitting idle waiting for the someday in a storm. We had allocated basically a truck that would be able to clear near 36 inches, which is what the engineer felt would be our highest concern. And we could also use that for other EMS related functions. So the vehicle wouldn't be sitting somewhere, in essence, not being utilized and not being ready for that thing to maintain its readiness. It's got to be used, it's got to be serviced and taken care of, and not just sitting idle. So the vehicle that we spec'd had a multi-use purpose to it. So I thought that was a wise thing. And at the end of the day, I think one of the points that I was trying to send with the grant writer when they wrote it is that could we put an ambulance through that high water? Could we put a truck? It's possible, but we're risking somebody's life in that guess. And also, you know, in pure mathematics, if we put an ambulance through, an ambulance today costs 250, 300,000 unequipped. You know, it's a $400,000 or more, $500,000 asset. And I just don't think it's wise to put it into a situation that could compromise the longevity of that vehicle, which we will use over the next 10, 15 years. So if anyone has any questions on that.
Yeah, Jack, can you drill down a little bit at the last page? I just, I think some people, when they think about a high water rescue vehicle, they think of a huge vehicle. Can you just describe the truck in a little more detail so that everybody on the board understands where you're actually asking for?
Sure. So a high water vehicle, that's true. That's the first thing that I thought of. It was some huge military oriented kind of vehicle. We're asking for a 2500 pickup. It's basically a heavy duty pickup that would have slightly larger tires to accommodate the lift. It would have a snorkel kit, which really just keeps the engine breathing in the water situation, not intaking fluid or seawater, which would be extremely corrosive. Just like on a boat, you can't get the seawater into your coolant system. It compromises that. But it's basically a pickup with a cap, not some ridiculously sized vehicle that we would have no other purpose for. And it would accommodate a stretcher mount in the back, in the cap, to keep somebody out of the weather or the elements, and to move personnel and gear back and forth if needed.
One of the other things that we talked about on multi-purpose use for this vehicle was, and I thought of some of the calls we've gone on when we have, a foot of snow or more, or anything in that range, when we're trying to get access to people's residence. There's other flood-prone areas in West Neck. We did get letters of support from the, there's a Longview community, the Ram Island Association. There's other communities that become limited in access. So I'm with you. There's times where we get things, we develop a plan and then we put it on a shelf, or we get a vehicle and it gets so what I would call kind of mothballed, and you break it out every once in a while. But, looking at this vehicle and in talking to you about it, having a somewhat regular use for it is much better for emergencies when it's used all the time. So I think a 2500 series or F-250 style truck or that size is something that could be used for other things. So for me, it made a lot of sense. And Joe, can you build on, maybe we've taken elevations down there, the thought of using this as a stopgap measure instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars doing road elevations.
Yes, the analysis behind this revolved around reviewing historical road topping conditions. So when we have records of the causeways being overtopped by water from either side, the depth of those circumstances. We also surveyed the road to understand how much we would raise the road to eliminate those overtopping situations. We compared that with the operational capabilities of different vehicles, and then correlated all those numbers to understand that the 2500 pickup truck, lifted and modified, would be the cheapest option that extends our ability to get to the Ram Islands in those conditions. We looked at raising the road to those flood elevations, and that becomes a much more expensive project. There's wetlands, there's seawalls in between. It's an option, but it's a price tag that the town can't really consider at this juncture without significant outside support. We also looked at other types of vehicles, like, traditional, like deuce and a half style 6x6 troop carrying truck. And when we looked at those options, the price points were comparable, but they offered limited additional functionality. It's not the kind of vehicle that we would be driving around town for other uses. And the major concern was that a vehicle like that would still cost money, but then offer limited additional functionality and have the high likelihood for for sitting and rotting and requiring additional maintenance. So the simplest approach was to look at the modified pickup truck.
Can you remind me how much the pickup truck was? It's 90, right? 'Cause the grant-
60 for the truck, 6 for the lift kit, upgraded tires were 1,500, snorkel was 1,500, the cap was 4,000.
It was about 100, yeah.
The total was 93, but
Right.
the actual vehicle, because it's just pretty much a stock pickup truck
Right.
that gets lifted, it got up to 93 was the total.
Because I remember with the grant, we were saying it was 45 that we had to come up with, and I just remembered that number. Okay,
Yeah, it's about 100.
okay,
And,
when all said and done.
yep, yes,
So there was a grant that you applied for,
Yes.
Yes.
it was rejected?
it would have covered 50% of the cost,
50%, okay.
yes.
And what are the other uses of the vehicle?
Jack, do you want to speak to other uses?
Yeah, so like the chief mentioned, during snowstorms and limited access times, we would utilize it. We do not have any first response vehicle in the agency. We would utilize it to go on medical calls. You know, the truck needs to be used and ready and available, and we definitely could accommodate that. We have the 10K race coming up. We have the fireworks coming up. There are definitely applications that we could use the vehicle. You know, it's kind of the analogy, and I'm not talking about Shelter Island Fire Department, but fire departments and ambulance companies in general have first responder vehicles, Tahoes and Suburbans. This is more economical and has more use for us. You know, a Tahoe is $80,000, $90,000 vehicles. You see them off islands all day long. Fire departments and ambulance companies have them. This would be a pickup that we would utilize for that same kind of purposing, but we would have the added features of the high water application, which, you know, still remains a concern for me. We at times lose complete access. You know, people will say you can drive through it. Yeah, I can tell you, I've been in the town business for a long time now, and there have been storms that we have lost access to Ram Island that we were lucky to get through medically. And, you know, we should prepare for that. We should be ready. We know that there's a risk, and this would help mitigate and allow us to respond to people to get them help. And I think it's a very fair dollar amount. You know, it's practical. It's not excessive. It's not some fancy thing. It's a modest pickup that will work. And I think it's something that we should definitely consider.
Also gets us on the ferry in those events as well.
Right. Yeah, we have that ferry access picture too.
Right, back in that storm that we transported a patient, we utilized a private citizen's vehicle to get a patient on the boat. So we would, in the future, if we had this vehicle, we would be able to accommodate that situation. Not that I'm looking to, but you know, we don't know what these storms bring sometimes, and we have to make with what we have. And this would be a tool to allow us to be much more effective in medical treatment of patients here.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay.
Yeah, and just for clarity for the board, you know, the town appoints me every year as the emergency management coordinator for the town. This is not, that vehicle is not a police department request. It's an EMS request and will be maintained and utilized by EMS. It has zero, so to speak, to do with the police department, but in that emergency management role and us doing planning for the future and planning for our current circumstances, we have to look at these things and try not to get caught short when they're really needed. I mean, another thing that Jack didn't mention was Mashonack. When you think about getting out to the Manor House or somebody lost or out onto a beach in a medical situation, that vehicle would be tremendous for that, especially if you threw snow in there and on a snow event. So there's, you know, the thing where it rings true to me is having it utilized, you know, where, you know, he could have one of the chiefs of the ambulances respond with that vehicle on a day-to-day basis, plus have the versatility of so many other things. So, but again, just to really be clear that it's not a police, it's an EMS vehicle having nothing to do.
Where would it be kept?
Jack, where would you keep it?
We would keep it at our ambulance facility so we could dispatch it out on calls like we do in ambulance. It seems to work. It's central, and whoever the closest person is can get to it and respond in it.
You know, what grant program would this be through?
We tried to get it under, I just took a note on that, from the New York State Climate Smart Communities Grant. And Jen Messiano was going to be able to speak to that today, why we didn't qualify. But I can't speak to why it was denied by them. I would defer to Jen on that, but it was under the New York State Climate Smart Communities Grant. And Jen regularly looks for grants for that, but when it didn't survive that, I pulled up, I don't know, Shelby, you would know, it's like one of the last budget sheets from last year, and I saw it was in, and then it was removed as a budgeted item late in the process. That and a couple of other items, which, and for all purposes, it took our capital planning budget to zero. We have currently a $0 budget for doing capital planning. And I'm going to hit you with 4 other things that have been on the radar for the police department. So one of the things I frequently hear from the board is to look forward and look to the future and do planning, not to in any one given year say, hey, look, we need this, this, and this. So that's one of the purposes of how this committee came to be, was to do some real planning. And so the need, and as Jack says, for the EMS vehicle, this EMS vehicle is not going to go away when we look at planning for the future. So if it doesn't survive this year, I'm sure it's going to come up next. And so are the next items that I'm gonna bring up. So we're trying to do forward-thinking planning. So am I good to go with my anything else? Okay, so,
Jack's good to go, right?
Jack, you're good?
I'm good, unless there's any other questions. Great, thank you for your thoughts on this. And like I said, I wouldn't be here talking about it if I didn't think it was necessary. It's really a need, not a want. And I think it's a modest and fair dollar amount. It's not excessive by any means in the vehicle selection. And thank you to the engineer and the chief and the other people, Ken Lewis, that, you know, put a lot of time into this. You know, we weren't here looking to buy a vehicle. That was not the case at all. This became the resolution to a problem that we're trying to mitigate for public safety. And it's really a need, not a want. And thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.
Jim, how do you address the lack of use, meaning it's sitting for such a long period? I mean, when you need it, you need it.
Right.
When it's something that you buy that you really use, it's almost like buying a tool. You know, you buy a tool, but if you're only using it twice a year, you usually rent it, right? I mean, that's.
To me, what Jack, as the director of EMS, is describing is utilizing it somewhat daily, almost like he referenced the fire department as the chief's Tahoe, right? In that chief's Tahoe, they have some basic turnout equipment. They're the first on the scene, and they can go. It sounds to me like, Jack, and tell me if I'm wrong, that maybe an ambulance chief may use this on
what I would call a day-to-day basis with basic turnout gear, but also be there for anything that's out of the ordinary, whether it's snow, isolation, a beachfront, or going.
What do you do now? With these issues that you're just describing, when he responds, you don't have the truck now, but what would he do today?
Right, so Jack, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so today, we rely on the volunteers using their own personal vehicle. And the question becomes, what's our responsibility in maintaining those when they use them in compromising situations? If we're going to ask somebody to drive their personal vehicle through high water to get, in effect, to a patient, I don't know what we're going to assume in the future to resolve those issues with their vehicles and stuff. I think the town is the agency, and I think we as an agency, municipality, have the obligation to get the resources for these people to be volunteers, not rely on them to use their own stuff. But Mr. Gooding, I think you had a good point. I think the analogy of the tool is a good one. This is a tool, but I look at it as more of like a multi-tool, like a Leatherman. We're going to buy something that's more adaptable to using every day. And I can tell you right off the top, the 10K is a massive event for EMS here, even though everybody has a part. We have a big piece of that, and our obligation is to this community, and we put all our assets out. That vehicle would very much be utilized for the 10K. The 4th of July fireworks, we have limited access at the beach, where the chief will tell you there are, depends who you talk to, near thousands of people in that zone. If we had an emergency to get to, we would very much use that vehicle to utilize that and possibly even transport people to a treatment area. Mishamik, we go into, make up a number, 5 times a year, we drive a $400,000 asset and scratch the sides and compromise the vehicle to get down there, because that's what we do. But we could use this other vehicle probably in that sense. So I would not be here asking for something that, because I'm very much against having something sitting idle and rotting, and even just being outside under the trees. Some of the vehicles in the center of town are falling apart from the climate, because it's not in a garage or something. But this vehicle would be used. My site on that, my foresight is that we would respond to calls, keep the equipment fresh and up to date, and that thing would be ready. We can't try to start it the day of the storm. It has to run, and that's only going to happen if we utilize the equipment.
Jack, with the stuff that goes into the truck, besides the truck itself and the cab and all the other stuff, you have to equip it, right?
Correct.
So it would be equipped similar to an ambulance? It would
Not
be
equipped similar. So the money, the 93,000 includes my anticipated costs of equipment, but it would be necessary equipment like just the stretcher, and the stretcher mount alone is thousands of dollars. We just purchased a new stretcher that is not what we would need to put in this truck, but the new stretcher costs $40,000. So
$20,000?
expensive.
40,000.
40,000.
Actually, it was 42. I was trying to round it off because it's hard to swallow that number. But that's what it is. My site is on the vehicle having a stretcher, and it's really to puddle jump. It's to get somebody to an awaiting ambulance. We're not trying to replicate an ambulance in service. This is going to be something that's going to go extract somebody from a situation and bring them to an awaiting ambulance. So, most of our ambulance equipment is mobile. We would stock, if somebody, depending on the issue, if somebody's having chest pains that we need to get to, we're going to bring that type of equipment with us in this vehicle.
In that vehicle.
Yeah, it's not going to be stocked with that. I'd have to be asking for a couple $100,000 to stock it equivalent to an ambulance. So, and I'm not doing that. But we certainly could take what we need in this truck to the patient, treat the patient, and bring them back to an awaiting ambulance. So
like in the case of the 5K, would you still have the ambulance there, or would this vehicle, just hypothetically, would that you would use less of the ambulance as a result of having that truck?
No, I think what with this truck is going to gain us access, the ambulance, let's say we have an incident in Ram Island, that's what we're really talking about
Right.
here. We're only gonna get as far as probably Cobbetts Lane and Ram Island Road. That's where the ambulance would stage and wait for this vehicle to go extract somebody from a situation, from an emergency, and bring them back to the awaiting ambulance, back up on the highland, to which point they'd be transferred into the ambulance, and then taken to the hospital. You know, it's not replacing an ambulance, it's augmenting an ambulance.
Jack, an ambulance is $500,000, right? I mean, I don't know what an
Well,
ambulance.
yeah, the last ambulance we bought was just between 250 and 300,000 empty.
Empty,
And then
right.
you have to deck
Empty.
it.
The stretcher was 40, we just purchased a new stretcher because we had one break. It was 42,000 for, so I would say it's you know, just under 500,000 for that ambulance sitting if we were to purchase something with everything new in it. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of resources, and you know, we want that to last over years. If we compromise it and put it in salt, you know, you know, I've asked that of many mechanical people. What does that mean to take an ambulance or your own personal vehicle and go through salt? And you know, it probably will shave off longevity of the use and the safety of the vehicle. You know, we got to remember, we have a lot of weight, we have patients, we have anywhere, it could be 5, 6 people in that ambulance during a call. We can't compromise it in putting it in underwater in salt. I just don't know that that's something we should be doing. You know, if we have to compromise a low-level vehicle, that's what we would do, and then fix it. But
You know,
to-
there'll be, I'm asking questions not as a naysayer, I'm asking questions that just, I'm thinking of how people respond to $100,000 vehicle that's used a few times a year. Is it possible, I'm just throwing this out, for the limited usage, okay?
Councilman Gordon, I think you got to get out of that concept.
Really? Okay.
I told you repeatedly, we're not using it limited. He's going to use it every day.
Every day.
Right, Jack, am I misquoting you there?
Yeah, you know, I'm not, you know, we're not gonna put, my thought is we're going to use it a lot. You know, we go on between 400 and 450 ambulance calls a year. You know, we were out twice yesterday. My expectation is that vehicle is going to be used to go on those calls twofold. One, it enhances our first responder program, and two, it keeps that as a viable vehicle ready to go, not sitting idle and stale. You know, my thoughts is we're going to put 15,000 miles on the vehicle in a year is what I'm thinking. You know, it's not going to be sitting and waiting for the someday. We're going to use it. I mean, if the town can get this asset, we're going to use it. We're going to use it for a lot of things. And I didn't bring it up before, but my other thought on the vehicle, you know, we would certainly have it available for any fire needs or any police needs or any community needs. It's a town asset, you know, just because the EMS has probably the biggest need for it right now, I would think. But just like all of our agencies, you know, we make everything available to each other. So if there's a particular need that anyone has, even highway, they need to utilize it for something, you know, it's a town asset. We're going to use it, and keeping it in use is what's going to keep it ready to go. So I hear you. It's not going to, that by far is it going to be sitting. If we get a vehicle, we're
You
going to
don't want that.
I also think it's fair to say we have to start thinking about this thing too, that, you know, we do a remarkable job of maintaining our equipment around here. And these things, yes, if it's a high water vehicle and it's going to have to go through salt, yes. Is it going to knock the longevity of it off? Sure it is. But I also think we have excellent mechanics that help service all of these vehicles, and we can keep these things on the road. You might get 10 years out of something, you might get 15 years out of something like that, that you're taking through the salt and the snow and the salt on the road. I mean, it's a tool. You take care of your tools, they're gonna last you a long time. We've proven to do that across the board, but there is a shelf life for all of these things. And eventually, you're gonna need to replace something. And this idea that we keep putting things off because we're going to, can we rent something? Can we try to patch something together to do this? It's the wrong way of thinking. This is what we're doing here is we're planning. This is long-term planning, and nobody's saying we're going to buy something that we're not going to use, going to sit on a shelf, and it's going to be, lay flat for the 5 years, and then we're going to have to replace it. I think we have to start thinking advance here, ahead. How far ahead are we going to be able to keep these things?
Well, the thing I've learned, okay, is that it's not just for high water.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the thing
I
that,
think your questions were great that way.
I think that,
Yeah, snow is a real thing. Mashonack snow is real. You get 2 feet of snow.
and I think
Mashonack.
that's really where you have to spend more time talking about, because we're thinking of only going out to the Rams, but you're using it for other functions, which might reduce the usage on the other equipment.
Right.
Not always, but
Right.
it might do some of the things.
Maybe we need to rebrand this, we call it the high water rescue vehicle, but maybe this is the
What?
Like the bad weather rescue vehicle.
all-terrain rescue vehicle.
It's not even bad weather, really. What you're saying is that there are many
Yeah.
times you don't need to take an ambulance out, that you might use this vehicle. That's what you're saying.
If you need to do a beach
That's what Jack-
rescue, something
that's what
like
Jack-
that.
That's really what you're saying, and like,
It's why your questions were good, because the public will have the same questions.
Right.
Right? That it's not just going out.
and it's not about not thinking ahead. When you ask questions, it's not that you're negative about it. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, okay? And if it has real value and real usage, and you can use it in multiple ways, that's important. But the learning thing here is it's not, right, the language, high water vehicle seems to pigeonhole it for one usage.
Yes.
Okay? And what you're saying is you're using it for other things. And I think you really need to spend more time talking about how you would use it, okay?
Yeah, I'll call it a multi-purpose rescue vehicle for EMS or something, Jack. I mean, I think Councilman Gooding makes a really good point there, that maybe the terminology we're using isn't the best, and Joe, you feel the same way. Maybe we pitch that differently come budget time,
Well, it started as a high water vehicle. That's the analysis that we did. That was the
Yeah.
first risk assessment.
Right.
The solution that we landed on offers these other capabilities, which is, I think, what makes it attractive.
When you
Chief, I
buy,
had just
when you
a
buy a
comment on
vehicle-
that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
when you buy a vehicle like that, you do special undercoating on it?
Yes.
And that's all,
Gonna help protect it, yeah.
so someone, you spend a lot of time,
Yeah, no, definitely. Between Joe and Jack from EMS looking at it for purpose-driven.
Chief, I just
Call it
have
an
one
all-terrain
comment.
severe weather vehicle.
Right, so go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, so everyone's hitting it right on the head, but I think what what you have to understand is the high water rescue concept was, and I guess it's the reality of it is what was the focus for the grant.
Yes,
It was the language that made
Yes.
the
Okay.
grant attractive.
Right.
Really and everyone's hit it right on the head. It's really a first responder vehicle. That's why every fire and EMS agency has them. They're for special purposes, quick access, limited access, manpower movement. We're looking for a first responder vehicle. We have a uniqueness where we're going to have, it's capable of high water access. So I think that's the tone that really it is, not to use, it is what it is. It's a first responder vehicle that has high water access capability. But it's not its total function.
and I think the conversation was really good for that purpose too, just to kind of clarify its uses and make it more diverse in its capabilities. Jack, like when we talked about fire response, I mean, they have three chiefs' vehicles that are Tahoes with equipment in them. The chiefs respond quickly, they get there right away, they have basic equipment, and understanding it even from that perspective as a first responder vehicle is really important.
I don't want to cut anybody short here, but we have a lot to.
I'm good.
Are there any more questions about this particular item? No. So Chief, you want to take the next batch here?
Yeah, so body worn camera, and I'll cover it relatively quickly. Back in 2020, police reform was a popular topic, and that committee, we went out to community and we created a police reform committee, and they had roughly about 10 items that they wanted the police department to address, and we've addressed almost all of them. And one of the items remaining was body worn cameras, that they felt that the police should have the capability to have a video presence that would help indemnify the officer, show how our officers respond professionally and react to certain situations, and give more continuity to the way we operate. So one of the things we did right away was we put in-car video in our cars. So our marked patrol cars have in-car video in them, and the officers that respond with the patrol cars have microphones, and those microphones can go pretty far, and they've been an asset for the agency. The next step in that process is the body-worn camera, and the body-worn camera would work in conjunction with the in-car video that's in the car. So when they go beyond the car, the placement of the camera in the car, they would have a camera on their body, and that would record or document emergency response and emergency events. So in keeping with that police reform, we said that in 3 to 5 years from that start, that we would implement body-worn cameras, and we're now at that threshold. So one of the things that is part of the body-worn camera process is that there's funding. And the funding is not cheap. Largely, the police departments on the East End and in the county are using Axon, and Axon is a company that has tasers, and they have cameras on the tasers, and they also have body-worn camera programs. And the county has gone out to bid, and Axon won the bid, and the county is using these camera systems. We looked at a conversion that would tie Axon into our current car system, and basically that we would be looking at over the next 5 years, $47,000 per year. So the cost in 26 budget year would be $47,000, and then that would carry out for the next 5 years to 2031. So I don't know, Christina, did these sheets get shared?
Yeah, of course, they posted it.
Okay, yeah. Right. So if you look at the sheets that I presented, Motorola also has a product.
What sheet is this? I don't have a sheet you're talking about.
Right, so a capital project request form, so,
Okay, that must be on SharePoint. Is that what you have it?
It's on the SharePoint, it's in the.
okay, yeah, that's why I asked, right. So if you get a chance, take a look at it, but we are at that 4 to 5 year mark of when we adopted the Police Reform Act and we sent it up to the state, and in 2021, I think we worked on it in 2020, we submitted it in 2021, and we said within 5 years we would try to move forward on that. So I am asking this committee to consider budgeting for body-worn cameras.
How many cameras?
So each officer would have one. So we would.
Any overall?
10, and we would have backups. We have the Bay Constables have, probably need 15 cameras, I think.
So the Bay Constables would wear these as well?
As well, yep. They have the same, they have similar interactions on the water that the police officers have on land. And they're peace officers, so they would have them as well. So my proposal is to,
Hardware.
there's software that comes with the package too. It's hardware, it's everything.
Everything. And then the annual maintenance or the annual?
That's in the $47,000 per year.
Okay. So the following year after you did the,
47,000.
each year?
Yeah. So what Axon model has gone to, like our tasers that our police officers carry, $10,000 a year.
It's like having a contract.
It's having a contract, and at the end of 5 years, They generally will replace the equipment. Our last tasers we bought outright, they didn't do that way, but then they stopped certifying and warrantying those tasers and indemnifying. They cover an insurance policy with it too. So we're now at $10,000 a year. I put it in my contracts line of my budget, and tasers are $10,000 a year. So what Axon's saying is they do a contract price, and our contract price is $47,000 a year.
We don't own them, we lease them?
We're basically a lease.
It's a service contract.
Yep.
That would essentially be in perpetuity. I mean, once you start the
Right.
program, you have to keep the program
Keep 'em going.
going. So it would be a new line item of at least 47,000 every year.
And I'm sure after 5 years, they'll have a different version of it. They'll replace the version and they move on.
And hope that they go down in price over time, but probably not.
Just from an East End perspective, many of the agencies on the East End, I didn't do an actual count, but more than half have now gone to body-worn cameras. Southold, our dispatch center, and probably who we work closest with, this year started the body-worn camera program, and they have all of their offices equipped with
And
body.
their Bay Constables instituted this as well.
Yep. You know, there's similar, they're exposed to similar things that our police officers are exposed to, so that protective measure.
No, I just never dawned on me.
Yeah, that part of it. Yep. Plus you need a couple in reserve, because if one fails and the cop doesn't have it on duty that day, there's no excuse. You go out with a body-worn camera every day. You know, you have to have backup, you know, you have to have that redundancy in it, so.
And part of that is the maintenance of the equipment, with the exception of abuse
Right,
or loss.
right, or loss, right. Okay, so that's in this, you know, that was a request made this year. Let me just see what you have next. A second request that we're making this year is, as most of you may or may not know, we have license plate readers at both North and South Ferry terminals. And what they do is collect information or scan every plate that comes across on the ferry. We do nothing with that data unless the plate is flagged. So it can be flagged because it's stolen, the registered owner might be wanted somewhere, or the vehicle may be suspended, the plates may be suspended.
You're able to do that instantaneously?
Instantaneously. And an alert goes to our computers in our police cars, and it'll say, hey, someone just came over on the South Ferry, we had a hit on the car, and here's the reg. So
It picks out outstanding parking tickets.
whatever's registered with DMV are inputted into the system. So if the registered owner is suspended, then yes, it would pick that up. If the registered owner is wanted, it would pick that up. If a police department had, let's just say, go to an extreme, because it's easier to deal with that, a homicide, and they had a suspect vehicle that left the scene of a homicide and it's entered into the system, and that vehicle came over onto the ferry, it would help. We also use it if we've had missing persons before, and they said the last time they saw him, they were driving a silver.
Alert kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll enter that into the system so that if the vehicle leaves the island, we can check that it's already left the island, or if it comes back, or it chooses to leave the island, then we can be alerted to that. So Amber Alerts and those kinds of things are also inputted into that. So with that said, and that's not really where I'm going, that's something that we already have, that we maintain. We would like to expand that and looking to the future again and doing planning. That Crescent Beach in the summertime is a popular place. We would like to add a license plate reading system down there. We have numerous calls down there. We have people leave the scenes of accidents, crimes, or other things that we could input onto our system. And we'd also like to add a video camera down there. At both ferry terminals, we have our own operated video systems so that we can see the activity at both ferry terminals. They're hubs of places that a lot goes on for the police department. So when we put the license plate readers in, we also added a video system onto the same properties. So what we would like to do in broadening that is that we now live in a world of video and information technology, and that our next very popular area is the Crescent Beach area, especially in the 4 to 5 months of the season.
And we are proposing that we add a license plate reader and a video system down at that location. The cost of the system is not cheap. We have a company that operates similar to Axon and other providers that would charge us $10,000 a year, $9,500 to be exact, and we would pay that basically for the next 5 years to have a system at that location. So when you get a chance to look at this, just take a look
8,500 per year,
per year,
5 years.
for 5 years.
What happens after that?
You just can keep going.
Or turn.
Or turn it off. In essence, you could turn it off at any point.
You renew a contract?
Or renew a contract, yes. Yep. Okay, the next,
Does that cover the equipment, or is that?
yes, the whole thing,
That's the whole thing, is
The whole-
8,500.
right.
These are, the installation is included?
All included, yep. The first contract would take us out to 31. Motorola also makes a product, and that would be a one-time upfront cost of $80,000.
That's what I was looking.
I gave you two
I
options.
saw that.
In both of these, I've given options, that we go contract-based, and it seems to be where a lot of technology is going, contract-based, or we go with purchase and install.
Well, it looks like contract base is cheaper too over time.
Right. We own the product at both ferry terminals, and that has really served us well. Okay, in 2023, I brought planning onto the town's radar of a police boat, operational police boat. We don't own either one of our police vessels. We got both of those through New York State Parks and Recreation grants, which were pass-through monies from the feds. And they are both not aging out, but coming up. We figured that when we were looking to the future, that we wanted to get to the point where we bought a boat that was purpose-driven, purposely built for the police department and our operation. And the current boats are 14 and 11 years old. Both boats have had their engines repurposed once, and one of them is coming up again, due for a second time. We've been able to do all of that through grant funding, through the New York State Parks and Recreation grants. But the Bay Constables feel, or the Harbor Masters feel, that we really should have a purpose-driven boat that the town owns. New York State Parks and Rec could take those boats back at any time if they had another more pressing purpose. I don't see that happening. But those boats were built really for general. They wanted something that, they could go up against boats with, that was built for us. And our last boat that we had built, that lasted more than 30 years. And this boat proposal was between $375,000 and $400,000 for this vessel. So I'm bringing that back up because it has sat since 2023. We were looking 2 years out from 23. We put it on the radar in 23. We said, okay, hopefully in 25, we could start thinking about planning for that. So again, I'm putting that back on the radar of this committee, that eventually the current oldest boat, which is 14 years old, will end its life purpose, and we'll have to go to one of our own purpose-built boats.
When we repower now, we pay for that, or that?
Currently, we're able to get that through the grants.
Okay.
Yep, so we've done that to both boats now, and the one that we did once already is already coming back up. The engine has close to 2,000 hours on it, both engines. So we'll look to the state again to repower that, but eventually that boat will have to be replaced. And in planning for the future, and looking out, 5 years, we want to, have these kinds of things on our radar. The last thing I have is a project that we have funded. It's our 800 radio interoperability agreement, and that spanned out 4 years. So I'm going to just take you through that. The county is moving towards a unified radio network. They're building out onto the towers on the North Fork. When that Greenport Tower goes live, you'll probably see communications switch
to our current VHF to 800 radio system, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't have to buy a lot of product all at once because it's expensive. It's roughly $200,000 for us to do this radio conversion. So in '23, we received approximately $40,000. In '24, we budgeted for another $40,000. In '25, approximately $40,000. Now, what happened was the '24 and '25 got merged into one allocation. The then town board used that ARPA money, right, to cover the costs of the radios. And the slight problem with that was when it was funded via ARPA, it zeroed out that line in the capital planning and budget account.
What is ARPA?
It was the COVID money.
It was a COVID,
American Rescue-
yeah.
Rescue Plan
It's like-
Act.
That was a big grant.
American Resilience and Rescue Plan, or, right. So in 1 year, basically in '24, you funded $80,000. And we used that money to get the next 2 years, which was '24 and '25. But in essence, we zeroed out our capital budget. So now to put the money back in, it's technically a tax burden to the taxpayer, right? So this year, because of radio costs have increased, we were asking for 60, but the actual cost is 71,000 to buy portables to meet our last, if you look at that same project sheet, in 2026, the plan was to purchase 12 portable radios, including all components, microphones, and those kinds of things. And at that time, it was 58,000. The current cost is 71,000. So I'm coming to this committee to complete our radio interoperability account in '26 with the need for $71,000. Just because when we projected originally, costs has gone up, tariffs, I don't even know what all the other things that play into that. So of my requests, I would really like to conclude the radio project in '26 because we've processed it all the way along, and it's the last step of a 4-step process.
How much of this is grant money?
None. So Christina's saying these documents are available
They're all on the website.
to the public?
Yep.
So that concludes my last,
And where are these in SharePoint? These are in there.
They're not, I mean, they're also just on the website. You go to the capital planning and
Okay.
grants page, discussion
it,
documents, they're
okay.
all there.
Send an email with the agenda. They were all links to the SharePoint included in it.
so we, and just to conclude my part is, we are trying to be forward thinking. We're trying to, look to the future and do good planning. I mean, I've heard the board talk about, planners before, and as department heads, we have a role in planning and looking to the future, and we would be remiss not to put these kinds of things on the radar. I have zero intent of overwhelming the public with these types of requests, but I also don't have a budget line come to the board and ask the board before that we should have. I would like to see ultimately a capital budget line within the police department where we can look at plans and we can carry that money over year to year so that when anything comes up as an oddity, that we would have access to it. So if we knew that we were looking at radios that we would have make it $20,000 a year, make up a number, and every year we put 20 in, and at the end of, if it built up to 100,000, boom, we get the radios, you know what I mean? Next year, it goes in 20 a year, that it never comes out when we scratch out lines in the budget and then ask to put money back in, there was a time, and I don't know how accurate it is anymore, that $100,000 would be a 1% budget increase, right? So I'm asking for $70,000 in radios that are part of a process, right? So, and I don't know how that line, Meg, you might know, or Gordon, you might know, I don't know
$100,000 represents in our total fiscal.
You don't
budget.
have but the highway department does,
Yes,
okay, and you do not.
I do not.
So every year, we put something aside for you, but we don't put anything aside for you.
Right, right.
I would like to see the police get to that where we could say, look, we have things that we need in the future that we just start to do a planning part.
I like that idea.
But I think the important part though also, again, to the process, because here we sit, I'll be perfectly blunt.
We're going to your topics?
No, I'm talking
okay,
about
yeah.
this is.
No, I understand.
My topic's gonna take 3 minutes.
Right.
The rest of this is more about, this is what we're doing here, but we don't have anything, we have no money sitting here for the capital planning. And I think the important part of that is what Jim is talking about, what he would like to have, what I currently already have for an equipment reserve fund. If we don't continue to fund these things moving forward, then it is going to be, and we keep putting it off and you put it off and you put it off, then when the dollar amount comes up for when it's actually needed, we're going to be in far worse straits as a town if we're not planning accordingly. So while it may seem like to say now to create a line for $20,000 a year to be put in to a fund for the chief to have planning for radios, body cams, whatever that may be, similarly to what we put in out of the tax base to the town, to the equipment reserve fund, if we don't continue to fund these things at all, then eventually it's going to be a much larger hit to the public, and the public is going to have a lot more to say about it when all of a sudden now you haven't funded something over a couple of years, and now we have a $300,000 expense that we're going to be shouldered with because we don't really have a choice. So I think that's the purpose of the planning of all of this. So we can sit around here as the capital planning and grants committee all we want, and it's important to forecast forward what we're going to need here. But if we're not going to have the funding for it, what are we talking about? So that really comes down to the board, because here we sit. I mean, these are all things that, and everybody will say that they need it, they have a necessity for it, but we currently have no money sitting here as this group, right? So that's going to be something that's going to have to be, I understand it'll be talked about in budget season, but I think we as a group need to be able to say to the board and to the public, like, what we're trying to do here is forward think and plan. But without planning the funding, the planning doesn't do us any good either.
What we know for sure is that Jim is very expensive.
Well, so one thing is that I'd like to clear up what Kenny said. None of the things that,
Laugh, okay?
I know. When he says.
He didn't think it was funny.
I know he didn't think it was.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I don't want to confuse the word like with operational
Right.
needs, right? So for us to operate, we need radios. I mean,
Right.
to have a professional police department, a 21st century police department, and to operate with general basic capabilities, and then we have requests from the public. What do you mean you can't do this? What do you mean you don't have cameras here? What do you mean you can't do? So we are trying to stay progressive in our operations too, but I never look at it as a like, Kenny, and I know I'm hanging on a word and it wasn't intended by you, but I look at it as more as operational needs and forecasting operational needs. So the body worn cameras came from the public side. It said, police, you're a 21st century police department. You need to operate in today's world. And in today's world, cops have body cameras. And they operate with body cameras, and it protects them and it protects us, the public. So when are you going to get them? And I said 5 years ago, we don't have the money. We got a forecast for this. So here I am forecasting for it, but we still don't, so to speak, have the money. So that request came from the public's input, with surveys, it was grassroots community people on there, and they said, hey, this is something you need to be a professional police department. So I'm reiterating that to this committee, and I'll push it again at the board level. If that doesn't come in a capital planning request, I'll make it in my police budget request. So but and just a final thing for me, and I'll stop, Joe, is that a PD equipment reserve fund is really where we need to push towards. Ultimately, the public will have the say on the use of it, like they do on Ken's, and the board will have final say on it, but having a reserve fund and planning for the future is far better suited for operations.
Makes sense, because the PD has evolved over time to have that need.
Right.
You know, we never used to have body worn cameras, you never had police shooters everywhere, you never had.
All those.
So all this stuff is expanding and growing, so our budget needs to reflect that.
Yep.
Makes sense.
And we can be expensive.
I think what goes along with this, as well is, where can we save money?
Right.
I think that, I know what you're saying, what you need, so obviously the follow-up is, well, how do we pay for it?
Right.
And what things can you do, or what things do you have within your budget that you can look at and maybe operate in a, not that you're not operating efficiently.
Right.
What can we do to help offset this? You have grants that you can do parts of it with. But everybody has needs, okay? And if we took all the needs of everybody, it's a lot of money, okay? And I think that we have to look at this will come out in the budget season.
And I think that you're gonna find during the budget season, when you get a hard look at the budget, that as a municipality, we operate very close to the vest. I will tell you, in the police department, because it's the department that I can speak to, there is near zero unnecessary things in that budget. They're all, like you say, where can you cut? There is nowhere.
And that's,
No,
it's not,
right.
it's like, how do you
cover this?
what are the priorities? And I think that's the issue that it really comes down to. Everybody thinks their priority, okay, and they are all, everything you spoke about, Jack spoke about, everything that everybody spoke about are their needs, okay? There's no question about it. The issue is paying for them, okay? And
I completely agree, and that's where I look at softening that to the public, like having a 1% budget increase because the police department has to conform with interoperability in radios is a huge request, right? But if we can soften that by putting money in over time,
yes,
that's a better.
and that may be the issue of that line item that you're requesting.
That's the whole purpose of this committee, is to plan out that financing over time.
Right.
So we need to be planning how much money we can put in each year so that we can meet some of these necessities.
But not to be critical, Meg, though, how do you zero out a capital planning budget? And I'm being critical of the entire board.
I agree.
How do you,
I agree.
I agree on this. When you say zero out, what was zeroed out?
Zero.
So
We have no money.
What happened was,
Nothing here.
we used the ARPA money to cover the expenses for that capital line.
Is this-
However, never put money in to continue feeding the line item. So for example, with the radios, I'm going to use that example because that's when Chief brought up.
Right.
We had $80,000 designated for the radios over 2 years, but then there was one more year that was going to be $58,000 at the time. Now it's 71. When we did the budget, we used the ARPA money to cover that $80,000 for those 2 years. When we did that, we did not put in that $40,000 and $40,000 to help pay off that last year of what is now $71,000. So essentially, what we did was we zeroed it out by using the ARPA money, but not funding the fund. So we just used ARPA, put no money in, so it was a zero expense for us, but we still got half the radios we needed. Now we have the $71,000 that we need to do, where maybe if we had put 40 in and 20 in, it wouldn't have been such a hit this
This
year.
ARPA money, you used the expression COVID.
You called it COVID money in the past, so I'm calling it COVID money, so you'd have a relation for it, because ARPA was confusing you last time we talked budget. So
Okay.
it's the same fund. It's that money that
was not allocated to anything specific.
right, that the towns
That-
got, that they could then decide what to allocate it to
So they
based
took
on the
that money
requirements.
okay, I got it.
And purchase the
So that's-
radios.
Okay.
Because it
got
fit
Yeah.
into
Got
that.
it. Okay, now I know.
So Shelby, can you do the years? What do we have in capital planning in '23? Because I'm looking at this line here, and approved, it looked like we had 285,000. I'm looking at the list.
Yes, we did.
So we had a budget line of
We
285.
bought a power lift, we updated EMS radios, and we
Right.
spent the 40,000 for the,
And then in the following year, we had a budget line of 230,000,
right.
24. Is that correct? And then in 25, 0.
No, that's when we tried to use the ARPA in 24.
Right, which is what killed 25.
Right, but we had,
Like,
did we tax
we have
base?
some money from prior projects that have just kind of been rolling forward.
Okay,
So maybe this is a good discussion for like our next meeting is what out of those projects, like, so for example, we put in $20,000 in 2023 for a carport structure for the stage center.
yep, I
That
see.
has not happened, so that just keeps rolling over from
Gotcha.
year to year.
So that's,
So maybe this is something we need to like
Right.
go over this spreadsheet that I have and kind of review some of these projects and kind of see where we're at as far as the capital money that's kind of just been encumbered over these years.
okay,
Yes, you're correct. Last year, there was no money
zeroed up, right.
in the capital.
It might be
budget.
helpful to talk about just like the math of how this impacts, the committee impacts the regular budget.
Right.
Go into budget season. And so the importance of capital planning is to stay on the capital plan. When the money gets removed in a given year, whether it comes from another source or you just scratch it, you go into the next budget season with that being 0. And instead of carrying over, say, 100,000 and then looking to increase the capital budget from 100 to 110 and seeing that small, now you're reintroducing 110,000 from 0. And so your capital plan, by skipping 1 year, gets very disturbed in the ultimate budget because you're asking now to replace something at its full value rather than this incremental change. And we've worked with the engineering department since before me, has worked with the highway department since before Ken, to take a capital planning approach towards all of our big ticket infrastructure items. So we evaluate all of our roads, we evaluate all of our bulkheads and marine assets, the big ticket items. So specifically so that in a given year, we don't have to come to the town board and say we need $400,000 for a bulkhead. And we amortize, or it's actually called a sinking fund. We put all of our assets on a list. We schedule out when they need replacement, and then we add up every year how much you need to include so that when that year comes up for that big ticket item, you have the money there to expend. So that's not actually in our capital plan. That's actually, those infrastructure items are in the highway budget. So the line items that say things like bulkheads or even roads,
Buildings.
that number also. Those are not just what Ken or I say, are we going to try to do this project this year? It's based off of our full comprehensive list of assets and probably a 5 to 10 year look ahead window, so that when we get to 5 or year 10, we've got the money to execute the project. There are, just to broaden the conversation, there are a few items in that infrastructure list that are huge, but largely they're not that big. So for those projects, we haven't established a capital reserve plan. We just capital plan within the highway department budget. But you're talking about something different, an actual legislative action to create a reserve fund for the police department.
Similar to the one that we had for.
Similar to what you have for.
That's right.
Which has rules around.
Well, I guess because of the nature of budgeting and where things are going, it's based out of what I would call necessity, because as we look at these things, we keep tabling these things. We did a 5-year lookout initially, and now we're continuing to do that, but it's just gonna compound. I'm gonna sit here next year with 2 more items.
It's a time bomb.
Right.
Well, and I think it's also, the understanding is, these things aren't gonna get any less expensive.
Yeah.
You might spend $10,000 on, the body cams, for the 5 years here, and then the next time you go to redo them, now they're gonna be 15 or 20, because the tech is gonna be, it's just, all of these things are gonna be,
Well, even the radios, they were 58, now they're 71.
it's gonna happen. I mean, it's just.
In the buildings, there's nothing put aside for buildings?
Buildings are in that plan also. Same sinking funds, same sinking fund style. But this for maintenance, we don't budget anything like a new town hall or something like
No.
that.
Purchasing or.
Yeah. Just for
And
maintenance.
that's in the capital?
Nope, that's just in the highway
Everything is
budget.
put in the highway?
Yeah. So that doesn't have the same legislative structure as Ken's equipment reserve budget, where I think there's some laws that dictate, how the money gets expended. We do this capital planning internally, and then when the highway budget gets presented to the town board, that number is justified by our analysis, but you can choose to scratch it or not. It's just how we landed on the number. So
So
it's,
Joe, where is this with the municipal, with the assets? Like you were talking about buildings and.
buildings, marine assets, and homes.
Where would I find that?
I do it. Yeah, I do it with Ken.
Where is it?
In the
It's in
budget?
the
Yeah,
budget.
yeah.
So if you look in the highway budget, you'll see town landings and bulkheads, you'll see jetties, you'll see
Right.
town buildings, you'll see.
They have line items,
They have
respective
line
line
items
items
and
within
those-
the highway. budget.
Joe and I look at when it comes to like jetties and bulkheads, we'll look at something like we're gonna be identifying something that we need to do this year with a bulkhead. So we will look at that and we will try to fund into that bulkhead and jetty line this year.
Over a certain number of years?
Right, so
Yeah.
just quick.
Long-term planning is over.
If we have 5 bulkheads that are gonna last 10 years.
Right.
And they each cost $100,000 to replace, we say we've gotta have $10,000 per bulkhead per year, so that we have enough money at that year 10.
Right.
And that is the number that we put in the budget request that year.
And that number is left over at the end of your year?
Sometimes it's not. Sometimes we rely on it being left over so we can carry it over, because we know that next year we have that big expenditure, or 3 years from now, we have that big expenditure.
Right.
But sometimes that's the number that's accumulated, and we clean it out so we can achieve that project. We may put in $50,000 this year, but next year's project actually costs $125,000. And so we rely on that carryover,
Which is exactly what we did with Congdon Dock, pretty much.
Exactly.
Congdon Dock was, the
Right.
Congdon bulkhead was a perfect example.
Right, often the project costs
Because-
more than what we've budgeted.
And when it comes to
Carry over.
bulkheads and, landings, that kind of thing, those also require DEC permitting. So in the case of Congdon bulkhead, we just did it this last year, but it was in the planning process for 3 years prior to me even getting here. So Brian.
But you are budgeting each and every year?
We kept moving the money forward,
Right.
but even with that, but that's another example. That wasn't on the board, but that was on the DEC. When that project was first scoped by Brian and Joe, when that first started.
Right.
That dollar amount was, let's just say it was $70,000, $75,000, whatever it was. By the time we hit stride with it,
Yep.
it was $130,000. So, but that's another reason to keep moving it forward, because when you're at the behest of the DC, for example, you might not have the time to do it. So it's ideal to keep funding it moving forward, so that when the time comes that they sign off on it, in that case, we have it funding
So at
it.
the end of the year, you know the amount of money that's carried over that you didn't spend that was allocated for, let's say, bulkheads.
Yeah, for a given project that we may be identifying, yes.
Right, we have at least a 5-year look-ahead plan.
But he doesn't have anything. There's nothing put aside. There's no line item for you.
Well, you do it through this committee.
We were doing it through, the capital planning and grants.
Right.
Okay, so the last item on here is with my office. That's $100,000 request for required drinking water system upgrades. This is a regulatory mandate from the county health department, and it's to do things like install, modify, correct non-compliant issues with our wells, disinfection systems, nothing that's elective, just things that are out of compliance that need to be addressed. This is a carryover from last year, which is something that wasn't funded, so it's in here again.
That's grant.
No. No, this is an out-of-pocket request, so to speak. We're not aware of any grants that would help support this. It's a little complicated because it plays into the municipal septic discussion. Yeah,
Which is grant.
which is grant, right?
And water is part of that?
We're trying, yeah.
So it's not definite.
Well, we don't have a plan yet. That's,
No, but I mean, the use of that fund, okay, I thought the use of the fund can be used for water.
water, yes,
Okay,
you're right about that. Water related to the septic project, yes.
This is the Lolota money?
Yes, 1.25 million.
That's actually item number 7. But this is a capital request because we don't have, I've got a mandate from the health department to make these changes.
Understood.
So we have to present, the request to do this, and the expectation is we do it within a reasonable amount of time. And it's from last
Come up
year.
with some solution. If we
Yeah,
can
have a
come up with
solution.
some solution that uses that $1.25 million grant for the septic and the water, then this is our fallback.
Right. Right.
this is the water issue that we have the mandate at the end of the year.
That's right. Yeah.
That's not hard, or if you have a plan, I think we had discussed this, that if you have a plan, it's not,
That's right.
they want to know where we're going.
It's hard unless you have a plan.
Right,
I don't know where you're going, that's okay.
Yeah.
They need to
Okay.
know what our plan is.
so
Yes.
it may not be an issue if we have a plan. I mean,
That's right. That's exactly right.
Right.
Yes. It may not be an issue if we have an acceptable plan.
Right.
Acceptable plan.
And it's moving forward.
And it's moving forward.
And that deadline is basically 6 months from now,
That's right. If you don't have a plan,
if you don't have a plan.
yes. Yep. Okay. So that's item number 2.
Meg.
All right.
Should we skip all Jen's, since she's not here?
Yeah, Jen's not here, so she can't give it, right?
Well, some Joe might know some.
Yeah, okay, so for the Mananic Creek dredging, I had a conversation with Joyce Novak because the Peconic Estuary Partnership was looking to use Mananic Creek as one of their test sites for a project that they're doing that really revolves around using environmental means to remediate poor water bodies. And so in that basic general study, they determined that Mananic Creek was too far gone for their study. The water quality would not have sustained life the way they needed it to in order to use organic means of remediation like seaweed, eelgrass, shellfish, things like that. So in talking to her, she said that really the best option for the creek would be to find a way to dredge the silty, muddy spoils out of it. And so she also told me that there's a grant available through New York State, and it is it's part of the Environmental Bond Act, the Clean Water, Clean Air, Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act. And she said that the Water Quality Improvement Project grant program might be able to help us with all of the engineering and planning for the dredging and getting the permitting for the dredging. And she said that if we can get that state grant, then there is a very high possibility that the Peconic Estuary Partnership could actually help provide us the match for that grant. So the town may not have to come up with any funds themselves. We might partner with PEP. PEP can give us the match for that state money. So Jen is looking into it. She said that the best option for this was the non-point source planning reports, using that, the non-agricultural, non-point source planning grant. because in order to remediate, you have to remove the really dead organic materials. So that would help us get through the first phase of possibly being able to dredge the creek. And then we'd have to go for a second round of funding to actually afford to dredge the creek, because in a situation like this, where the spoils are really fine organic matters, you typically have to barge them somewhere else, like New Jersey or Pennsylvania, because you can't just put them on shore. It's swamp sludge and it stinks and it's gross. So typically the DEC will have you truck it somewhere else. So that would be a whole different set of the project, but this could at least get us started, see if it's even feasible, and figure out what our options are.
We could also just get information from the county too, just to, because Joe and I both have a good relationship with the county.
All about paying them to do it?
Well, about paying them to do it, and maybe there's some other sort of crossover, from us, because it's gonna need a hydraulic dredge, I'm certain of.
Yeah.
You're not just dredging this stuff and putting it on a barge. You're probably gonna have to pump it out someplace to a barge, I would imagine, because of the way the creek is positioned down in there, so.
Right.
And they have the hydraulic dredge capacity, unless they put a long stick on a barge and load up another barge with material, I don't know, but I would think it's a hydraulic dredge to do it, be my guess. But they might be a good people to talk to, because I know when we had conversations, when they just did the dredging operation off of at the mouth of Mananic for us,
Yep.
they have had experience with this type of material that they've had to dispose of, I think, too. And they at least could give us some guidance. I could ask.
That would be great.
Yeah, where do they take it?
Where they take it and how they do it, because they,
So there's a grant for the study.
Yes.
That's the starting point.
Yes,
And how wide, where do you go with it?
for everything, the logistics of how you would do the dredging, what the requirements would be, the engineering of the project, the DEC permitting, all of that.
And so Jen is looking into seeing that grant
Yes.
opportunity. Okay.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much mine. It's one of those unique situations where we might be able to, by partnering with PEP and the state, get that portion of it paid for without having to come out of our pocket.
Because we have no money.
It works because we have a zero budget.
yes.
Works in our budget. Right?
My only concern is this.
In capital planning and capital projects, the town should be setting the agenda. We try to stay away from chasing grants just because they're available.
Well, this
So
is,
that is my only thing, but I don't know. I don't know what our
yeah,
total
great.
punch list is.
This is a topic that's actually been kind of on the town agenda for a while.
Right.
It's come up quite a few times, the
Yep.
health of Mananic Creek and needing to dredge it. And when we were able to just get the beginning part of
Yeah,
it.
dredge it. Yep, yep.
We were able to dredge the inlet part. There was a big push from the whole community there to try to dredge further in because it's just not flushing well.
Understood.
And everything's nice.
Completely get it.
It's been on the table, so when PEP came back and said, well, we can't help you fix it, because we've been looking at all different ways to help improve the creek. They said, well, based on all the science that we're pulling, this isn't working. So
Right.
they're like, this is your option. So
Right.
we've been trying all other methods to help resolve the problem, knowing that dredging was an inevitability. So when this opportunity popped up, I was like, this is something we might be able to take advantage of.
So Jim, what you're saying is not just look at grants in terms of solving the problem. Okay? I mean,
Well, we had some time where we were chasing grants and using our grant writer, chasing things that weren't really priorities, just because it was easy money to get, so to speak.
Right. I'll give you a good example. It'd be like a type of project we never spoke about, and then there'd be a sidewalk grant available, and we'd say, oh, well, maybe,
We could put in a sidewalk somewhere.
you should consider.
Where do we want to have one?
Well, it's not to say that's bad, but we tried to, in concept, stay away from seeing what money's available.
Focusing in on specific.
Right, have projects and match them with grants rather than look at the field of grants and then come up with projects.
But I guess the plan is really most important, because even when you dredge, yes, it will increase the flow, but what is that the answer? I mean, is it going to, you know, we have West Neck Creek has some flow and it's deep, but that's not solving what you got going on up there.
Yeah, well, we're a few years into, I don't want to go too much into the weeds on Monantic, but we're a few years into studying the water quality there. And right now, all indicators are pointing to the bottom material as a primary cause of decreased water quality, because there's so much accumulated organic material that is reducing the oxygen levels in the summertime, where it doesn't support any meaningful life. So we are, like Meg said, we are several studies into water quality there, and it does point in that direction. That's not to say that's the same for every location, but certainly that is something that the arrows are beginning to point to as a good solution. But to your point, there are continued water quality issues like, you know, abundance of nitrates and things that will lead to other water quality issues. But dredging is certainly right now a serious solution.
But I think what Chief is saying is that we also can't assume that for everything that we have to fund, we can find something to cut to offset it. Some of these things are just going to be expenses. You know, as the demands put on the municipality grow, our expenses are going to grow, which doesn't mean that we can always cut things or find, you know, money somewhere else. Sometimes it's just going to have to cause a tax increase, unfortunately. So, you know, to some degree, we're going to have to be prepared to deal with some of that. It's just an unhappy reality of the way things have been moving lately.
Number 5, excavator grant reimbursement.
Yeah, this doesn't, I mean, the only thing, the excavator reimbursement's we've already received it. And it was, I think, what was it, Shelby? $78,000. And it's in the reserve fund. And the rest of it is, we're just waiting I've proposed the walking floor trailer, and that's going to be up for a vote to pass a resolution to go to permissive referendum to get the funds released to do so. And if it passes, then I have all the bid specs for the trailer, and I will put out a RFP. If it gets approved, I'll put the RFP out to start taking bids to have the trailer built. But that's it.
Okay. For Fresh Pond, I'll just cover, Jen, briefly. We're waiting for the contract to come in from the state for the grant, which was previously awarded. And we had hoped that we could execute the contract and begin work this summer, but we've not received the contract from the state yet. So it's likely that work won't commence until next year. Increasingly likely as the weeks go by that work won't begin until next year. But the money's available, so go ahead.
It could be fall and spring or spring and fall.
It has to be either spring and summer or summer and fall.
Okay.
Is that the lily pad thing, Joe, again? The guy come with that?
No,
Different one?
no, this is the long-term fix.
Oh, the big filter that's gonna go out there with the little dot.
This is where we lay out the money and we get repaid?
They're almost all like that,
Okay.
yeah.
So like on this particular one, it'll be incremental payments.
Right.
So the reimbursement will be, won't be like a lump sum, or it'll be like the excavator, it'll be over years?
The excavator is exceptional. Typically, these programs like the Fresh Pond one are fulfilled within a month, right?
Yeah, I would say it's more like the ferry flood.
Yeah,
As we get invoices in, then we'll
You
send
them
a
on, and you get
reimbursement request.
yeah, usually within 30, 45 days.
Yeah.
So you're not
And
carrying.
we have like a sizable.
35 to 40 days, wow.
30, yeah, it's pretty fast. Yep. And I don't think there's any sizable update with the wastewater. I won't speak for Jen because I haven't conferred with her on this, but that's just an ongoing talk about how to access those federal funds.
Okay.
I think that's it. Good. All right, do we have to take a vote to close the meeting? Then do we have to do that?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Favor? Aye.